Welcome back to another episode of Reinventing Finance with my lovely co-host, Tom. Tom, how are you on this fine afternoon?
Fine. Thank you very much, Nick.
Awesome. We are not alone, as usual. With us on the line from across the pond is Suleiman. Suleiman, welcome in our little humble virtual abode. Thank you for taking the time.
Absolutely. Thank you both for having me. It's a pleasure to be
here. Suleiman, maybe you can briefly introduce yourself and the company you work for, and just kind of highlight a little bit your journey, you as an individual, and then also what Socotra is doing these days.
Absolutely. So my name is Suleiman Sukkar. My actual title at Socotra is Director of Business Development and Deployments. What that actually means is that I lead the pre-sales and the delivery teams on the delivery side. So really, what my team does is we have a group of, internally they're called deployment strategists or product deployment leads, where we basically engage with prospects on the pre-sales side, help our sales team in moving the sales process along, identifying products that or identifying the solutions that our customers want to build, working with them on estimates, on SOWs, on proof of concepts, and helping really drive that process to make it as seamless as possible to them to understand what Socotra's value proposition is and how we're going to set them up for delivery. And then once they sign, our implementations or deployments team basically takes them through that journey and gets them live on the platform. So really the skill sets it's a combination of platform expertise, technical knowledge, insurance subject matter expertise as well, project management as well. So it's kind of an unbounded role for the team as they take on these implementations and get customers live. And really, I mean, the why it becomes interesting and exciting always is that our customers, there's different ways to implement on our platform. So they can choose to implement themselves, to do a do-it-yourself approach. And our platform, as we'll dig deeper as we converse more, our platform, the way it's built is, if you have a team that understands the technology, understands how to utilize APIs, then many of our customers choose to implement the entire solution themselves with just advisory and consulting from Socotra, from our team, or they can choose to work with a partner. So we have a number of partners that we identify and we work with, and they can basically help with the development and the configuration and get customers live. Or we can take on that approach ourselves with our team and help our customers, with the development and the configuration on the platform. So a lot of things, but that's really what I do. I've been at Socotra for maybe close to 3.5 years. And my background is just for you is I'm an electrical engineer by education and by trade. So I worked in the semiconductor industry here in the real Silicon Valley for a number of years before I moved into insurance. So I've been in insurance for the last 12 years or around 12 years in the insurance space. So that's my background. And I worked overseas as well as in the US on the insurance side.
Awesome. Maybe for those who didn't already pick up, in my view, Socotra is a modern policy administration system. It is probably less heavy lifting than Guidewire, but within that mix, you'll explain a little bit more which kind of geographical and product line mix you have, as travel insurance is usually different than a pension product or a medical insurance in most spaces. And I feel you've kind of hinted at it that one of the things that, at least outside in, you've said is to say you can literally set someone up instantly to start playing around with it, which a lot of companies struggle with. Is that a fair assessment, or what's the elevator pitch? Because we kind of went into what you're doing and your role, and that is the way I phrased the question. But just briefly, so people, what does Socotra do?
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, Nick, for that. Yeah, I mean, Socotra is an insurance policy administration system. That's what we are. Now, again, the question is, I think what you're alluding to is, why is Socotra different, and what allows us to be successful in the market? And I think to that is, yes, there's a number of players in the market that are there. Now, the way that Socotra is different is that one thing that you mentioned is, yes, as a pure SaaS platform, we can provide trial licenses. So we provide a try before you buy approach. So, as soon as a prospect is interested in Socotra, they can come to our website. They can basically request to get a license, and we provide them, instant access to our sandbox environment, or really our development environment, where you can actually configure products yourselves, and you can have access to all of the APIs and the entire system in order to start working and really build a product yourself. And we've seen a lot of our prospects on the pre-sale side will get this license. They'll go out, they'll actually build things themselves. And before they even decide to proceed with the full license, or a production license going forward. The key element here is that, yes, and then when you do get the license and you start building and configuring products, the question becomes, okay, how do I know where to start? Our documentation is exposed on our website. So if you go to socotra.com and you click on our documentation button, you can basically get access to our entire set of documentation. So you'll see all of our APIs that we're using, they're all exposed. And you can see specifically, if a user wants to know and wants to get deep into the technical side, they can see, yes, all these transactional APIs are there. What is the request? What is the response? And then it gives you a quick start guide into, okay, where do I start? So I got this software, I've got this configuration tool. Where do I start? What do I do? All these are there in the documentation, as well as we provide you a user guide as well of how do you get started, and how do you build on our platform, and what is in Socotra, what is a policy admin system, and then gives you ideas of, well, hey, if I want to build a complete end-to-end solution, what do I need to be considering? There's going to be some integrations, there's going to be other things that are going to be living outside, and Socotra and our documentation guides you to sort of what those things are, and gives you a path of how to implement on this platform. So I think these are the key things when you start talking about what is a pure SaaS platform, and then what are we offering in terms of these processes. And I think, Nick, I'll maybe stop talking. Maybe you have more questions that you want to dig deeper into. But I think as an overall item, that's what makes it possible for customers to implement this product and implement themselves. And actually, before maybe I go back, I know you mentioned about target markets and where we are and sort of lines of business. You mentioned travel and you mentioned other products. Maybe I'll just spend a couple of minutes here to tell you about, with Socotra, the way that our product and the way that the platform is designed, it's product agnostic. So you can basically build out P&C as well as life, accident, and health type products. So you have the ability to do both. So it's really the way that the data model is constructed, and the way that our code was actually written is that you can configure any one of these lines based on the flexibility of the data model. So it's up to you to define, based on the product that you're trying to build and the product that you're trying to design, how you're going to basically map that out within this data structure. And it becomes very flexible, where you can spin up these different types of lines of business. And our customers have basically implemented a wide variety of products, from commercial to personal, from life to P&C, and in basically different geographies. So we do have customers live in Europe, so customers live in the UK, in Switzerland, and other parts of Central Europe, as well as in Australia. So we've got a global base, as well as North America, and specifically the US and Mexico as well.
So before we, and I think there's some questions that I might ask about functionality and commercial model, but really, when you would abstract away that kind of high level pitch, it's try before you buy, and the level of documentation, aside from meeting functional requirements, etc., is that one of the key differences, or do you highlight certain other things? imagine you were on a stage and 3 other policy admin providers pitched before you. I don't know. I've had a similar thing. It was horrible. You kind of go, and someone even stole your line with the stripe of X. You know, with the when that was the way you did, or the Uber of wine. You said, "So are we." So imagine all of it. The generic stuff had already been said. Why? Where would you kind of go? Yep, we do that. But there's 3 things you need to remember about us. Try before you buy. I don't know. Because I think that can help someone who is just a little bit overwhelmed when they hear about SaaS and APIs and self-service and no-code and product agnostic, and you can do anything, and we're super cool and super nice. Yeah, you get the gist.
Absolutely. Yeah, and everybody, right, you're right. I mean, everybody says the same things. There's these jargon and these words that everybody uses, and it's all the same. And how do you differentiate? But really, yeah, I mean, I'll go back and I'll answer your question in the way that I start out with the documentation. So a lot of times, people ask me, well, hey, check out, this website, check out this company, go to that website, are they, what do they do? And a lot of times I find myself confused about really what is the product offering here? Are they a technology solution? Is it a policy admin system? Is it an MGA? Is it, what specific thing are you offering? And I think with Socotra, and with a lot of these companies, I don't find a documentation anywhere where I can just go in, download a documentation and say, okay, you know what? This is not really custom code, or it's not a custom solution that's being built. It's an actual product. It's a real product. And it's going to be, we've productized all those elements in a policy admin system. And that's the way that I would see it is, yes, it becomes clear when you go to the website that, yes, this is a policy admin system. Here's the documentation. And oh, by the way, all the other things that are, everybody else says, but really it's cloud native. Everybody says they're cloud native, but I think with Socotra, it's one of the real first cloud native platforms that offered both P&C and life. A lot of times, yes, many policy admin systems probably can provide both. Some of them are focusing on one thing, but really we will say that, that's really our bread and butter is you can do both. It's cloud native. And really, actually, our first line of code was on infrastructure. And when we say, it's cloud native and it's a productized core, what does that mean to a business user, right? You throw out all these words. What does that mean to you as a business or as an insurance carrier? Why is that important? It's important because when you do have a SaaS platform and a real, product in that sense, is that, we're pushing out updates. We don't have to work with a carrier to schedule updates on the platform, or basically, send out new features or deploy, defects or so forth, or patch up, the platform. All of this happens automatically. So every week we push out these updates to the platform. So all of our customers are on the same version of the platform. So I know that goes without saying with SaaS, but for insurance carriers, it's not really, when you think of Gmail and you think of Facebook, right? All of us are using the same version. You don't really care whether you're on software version 1.7, T1, 0.63, point whatever. That's how it is with Socotra. So you don't have to worry about those things. And why is that important? Because then you can make changes. It's one thing to, go live with a product, but then, the market is going to tell you different things. And that's where you have to react to what the market is telling you. So a lot of carriers, not a lot, every carrier is going to have to update their rates, is going to basically update the agents or brokers they work with. They're going to change their underwriting rules, their underwriting guidelines. So in this platform, it makes it easy for you to make these changes and propagate through all these different layers that you're configuring. So basically starting at Socotra, which is the core, making a change and then propagate through all these presentation layers, and where you have these changes take effect in minutes rather than months or longer than that when it does. And really what that comes down to is, it's one thing to say and one thing to focus on speed to market and speed to value. But then for us, it's also, the cost of change. How much does it cost you to make these updates? And that's where, we're saying, you're going to be able to, and our customers, as we dig deeper into that, have been able to lower the cost of change in addition to achieving, efficiencies on the operations side. as well as obviously getting to market faster. So I know it was a long-winded answer to you, but I would say, really focusing on documentation, focusing on the speed to, the cost of change and lowering the cost of change, because, you have a platform, you have a product where you have these updates getting pushed automatically to all of our customer base. And ultimately, they're all using the same exact APIs so that it becomes efficient for them and much less costly to make these changes. And ultimately, they can make these changes on their own without having to depend maybe on, an IT team and a large army of, IT folks to make these changes and updates for them.
Awesome. Thank you. I mean, it's a little bit my world. So check. I don't know, Tom,
I was just wondering, but it's always the classical question. If you talk about this kind of big solutions, how do you manage to let's say get those clients to change their infrastructure? Because it's a huge decision. It's not like, okay, let's just buy something.
Let's try Pipedrive.
So I'm always wondering. I also find it always extremely difficult, or it seems to be totally difficult, because so many people are involved and people don't want to change, and there's so much interest on the other side. So how do you manage this?
Yeah, I mean, that's really a great question. And that's really, that's every day, our team internally that's what we're focused on is, how do we, and the way that we see it is, there's a traditional, well, there's tiered carriers. So there's obviously tier 1 carriers and large insurance companies. These companies are basically, they have their platforms, they have either legacy platforms internally.
I think Allstate is building its own policy admin again, isn't it?
And then I'm not sure. I mean, I think,
Allianz tried. They tried, and then they tried to sell it. No one wanted to buy it. But anyway.
And then I know Allstate, I mean, they purchased Esurance. Esurance had, the digitized, quick auto insurance policies. And I know Allstate purchased them. And then, there were issues, or there were things that happened there. But yeah, I mean, it's possible. I mean, it's possible that these companies are. So Tom, I mean, it's difficult because yes, it's very difficult for these large insurance companies to actually get to the point of change, because it's a big thing. They've got all these systems, and they got to figure out all these internal business users that are used to doing things in a certain way. How do you convince all these business users that are used to doing things, A, B, C, or 1, 2, 3, now to get them to change and start to visualize what does it mean to go with a new set of technology? But I think, from what we've seen is that the companies that we've been successful with, and there's two types, we've worked with both MGAs, whether they're startup MGAs, insurtech MGAs, or with large tier 1 carriers. With the tier 1 carriers, they have ways to de-risk their approach when they basically select new technology. A lot of times it's, their innovation group that they have, and they basically experiment and they try these different products, with basically a greenfield opportunity and a new product that they're trying, or a new market that they're trying to uncover. And I think based on the successes of that, then they'll start making decisions on, okay, now let's see what we can do with our larger established businesses, and what does that mean to migrate and to move over an existing book of business, because there's a lot of challenges there, and there's a lot of cost that's associated with migrating these existing books of business and migrating all the transactions, whether it's billing and renewals and all the things that go along with that. So that's one way that these carriers do, is that they start out and they evaluate the platform with a new product, and then they make decisions based on that. And obviously with MGAs, it's a lot faster because they exactly know what they want. They have a niche that they're focused on, and they specifically know what they're going to be doing. And for them, it's existential. So for MGAs, they have to make it work. So that's where, a lot of times what we've seen is with MGAs, it's a faster sales cycle as well as a faster implementation, just because for them, it's existential. They need to go live quickly because they need to start selling policies. They need to get funding. They need to get reinsurers to believe in their product. So these are the types of things where we see, yes, with Socotra, it's a perfect fit for them because the platform is so flexible. They can do it themselves. They can read our documentation and implement and go live and basically start to iterate, which is a key thing, is how do you iterate after you go live and make these changes on the platform? And again, with tier 1 carriers, I think this is one approach, is to do it this way. But Tom, it is a challenge to get people to think of change and what that's going to look like for them. And it's really starting to, and a lot of times is they've made decisions and they've selected certain platforms, and maybe they haven't even gotten to realize the ROI that they've paid for these platforms. So they have to remain on them for a few years to see what they can accomplish in terms of an ROI on that investment that they did. But I mean, that's where we are, and we try to keep pushing this item, pushing Socotra in these opportunities, because you will, and there's ways for you to try it, and actually evaluate and build something that works. And it's not just a proof of concept or a prototype that you're building. You're actually building a real product that's going to be ready. So you can just switch you can turn on the switch, the product is ready, and you can move it easily to a production environment with the same code that you've built on the trial, license that we provide. So I guess long-winded answer, but hopefully that got to some.
Clear, but at least I mean that's I would say classical strategy. You try to get in somewhere where something new is happening, and then you hope they will like the solution, and then you hope to change to the big incumbent, so to say, to their basic structure.
Absolutely. And I think the other thing is what we're seeing as well is, a lot of, large insurance companies, are limited by the growth that they're seeing, even with their existing business. So yes, the de-risk is you go with a new product, you go with a greenfield opportunity and you start there. But we're seeing a lot of, well, hey, even our current existing products, we're not growing fast enough, and we're limited by what we can do with our platform. So we can't really make changes, or we can't really offer these additional things that maybe another competitor is doing faster than we can. So we're losing market share. And then that's where, they start thinking about, well, what's the process for migration? And that's where we're starting to see a lot of these conversations happen is, okay, how can we de-risk the migration approach? What is your data migration approach from one platform to the next, or even from a legacy platform to Socotra? So we're seeing a lot more of these, and we're getting involved with these types of, projects currently.
Okay.
Awesome. No, I mean, de-risk is it's ultimately the play of the game, right? Or the name of the game in a corporate setting. It's better than increase the ante, I would say. I guess one thing which, irrespective, just whether you've encountered, there is in insurance, and I think it's rightly so, to a point, there is a strong preference for make. And now you can argue it's because it's always been done like that, and people are safe for their job. But there's also about not paying VAT, not being able to write that off because insurance premium tax doesn't write that off. Outsourcing itself is not always delivering the cost savings that you have, etc., etc. You can prioritize. At least you decide to prioritize on those aspects that you cannot self-serve. And so, rather than being, pushed into a bucket with other clients, etc. And before so first of all, is there anything else on these arguments? And usually these are not put forward that clearly. Do you have any kind of arguments against that in general? Do you encounter these, or are the benefits so obvious that they're all kind of swept away?
And maybe Nick, just to understand the question, is it? I know you talked about the make preferences. Is the question how do we or how do we change the narrative, or how do we overcome these make preferences by insurance companies?
Because so you present, right? You have this great solution and you say, listen, we have this de-risk thing, and then the CIO says, listen, we can do this, right? But high vendor relevance, once we're on, we're fucked. Because that's great, we can self-select on whatever we've seen at Rentbook, but we cannot it's a flexible but still a standard software to a degree, and some things we just, because we don't have access to the code, some startups, I know a startup who started on a standard platform and then just rebuild it from scratch with no business benefit other than the investor multiple of having their own IP, because they're not a tech company. You're not a tech company if you're saying I'm running Excel or something, if you're on a standard platform. So what do you do about IP? What do you do about control, about customization? These are things that are either true or they just sound true. And then, especially if you have potentially a CTO, maybe they also want to build something. Maybe they don't want to be a procurement guy. So you have these aspects, and because we don't have a crystal ball, we don't know. And there's always anecdotal evidence to prove them wrong, because everyone has misbought, IT projects, probably similar ROE failure rate than startups. I don't know. But so how do you overcome this? And ideally, maybe not just to say, maybe, and if it's true, that's fine. But Socotra is 10x and so awesome, and that's fine. But just in general, because you're also an insurance, you're an expert, for other people who might not sell policy admin, what is the narrative that you can try to get through?
Yeah, no, thanks, Nick. I mean, I'll try to go through this with my understanding of this, but we've seen that. So we've seen customers or prospects or customers who come actually, and then they say that, yes, we want to build our own stack. So, hey, whether we're an MGA or we aspire to be a carrier, or we're a carrier in some form, but we want to build our own tech stack, including the policy admin system, including other things. Now, they might be successful in that since they own the IP and they do it. Now, what I've noticed is that the way that they build these stacks is because these MGAs or carriers are focused on, one line of business. They're really focused on or limited products that they're offering. So they're designing their tech stack based on supporting that one or few products that are in the same family. And then, they're successful initially on these things, and they grow and they write business and they own the stack. And, like you said, they get multiples and they're valued at a certain point because they own the IP. So they not only have critical mass in terms of, in terms of policies and premiums that they've acquired, but also they have the tech stack. So now that becomes something important and becomes valuable for people or investors to come in. But I think we've seen, I won't mention a lot of names, but you can actually see in the market a lot of these companies that went with a tech stack. They get to a point where, hey, what about, we did this one line of business, but now we're actually expanding in others. And, how do we do that? And they find out that there's limitations in that design when it was designed in a certain way. And then they start actually coming back and saying, well, how can a company like Socotra help us in terms of, either moving the book or actually, looking at, possible ways of expansion into these other lines of business, because it is complicated. It's not an easy thing to build a policy admin system that basically caters to all these different, transactions and all these different workflows. Insurance is not easy. It's a complicated thing. A lot of workflows are complicated. A lot of billing items are complicated. So that's where I think, the answer to your question is, yes, you can potentially do it, but we've seen cases where customers have built the tech stack and then they get limited in some way down the road when they start to expand into other lines and other things that they haven't thought about when they were viewing it from the lens of, one insurance line of business. And it becomes different if it's personal, if they focused on personal and now they're going to commercial or vice versa. There's different elements that you have to consider as you're designing that. So, obviously there's pros and cons to that, but we've seen the case where, yeah, we've seen it, go both ways. And, yeah.
I'm always a little bit amazed also by let's say the focus on those technical questions if people have built, let's say, software themselves. I also had a discussion a couple of weeks ago, and then I was asked if we did build our software ourselves, and then I explained that in the Netherlands, the whole mortgage market is more or less working on one big system, where the banks in the past decided just to build a kind of corporation, and they just put all the standards in this kind of company. It's a non-profit entity, and everybody decided to work on this platform. And the costs are much lower than anything else you have ever seen. And you see these over and over again. So if you would ask somebody who is just starting a company, did you build your own accountancy software, or did you build your own telephone systems, or did you build your own computers? Nobody would ever say, yes, sure, we're building our own computers. But then you're talking about something which is so complicated. You talk about your whole software system for policy administration, and then people start to think, oh, let's just build our own structure. I'm always amazed by that.
I think it's partly in that specific space, there is a VC expectation that some of the money is better goes into technology and IP, because otherwise it'll, where does it go? And I think, it's something to manage. And Suleiman, if I'm listening to you, I think it's, you go in, you make your pitch, and then, if people have different priorities, you say, good luck to you, sir. My door is always open. Right? I mean, ultimately, that's what you're saying, right?
I mean, yeah, in a sense that, yes, I mean, we're always there, and we've seen these boomerang effects where customers have gone, or prospects come in, they say, fine, you know what, we're just going to go build it on our own because we have a good feeling for it. But you know what is your value proposition then? I understand, like, Nick, to your point, like the VCs want certain things, but is your value proposition, like, what we're saying is, hey, why worry about this stuff that's complicated? Why do you need to rebuild something? Why do you need to reinvent the wheel on something that's already there? You focus on the things that you're good at. If you found a niche market that you want to basically exploit or target, then, focus on the underwriting rules, focus on how do you capture that market and capture the market share in that market, and how can you be profitable now? So I know that a lot of VCs now, it's not so much as far as growth and achieving growth, but it's also, well, profitable growth as well. It's one thing to basically write premiums in a certain way, but what if your acquisition costs are high, or your loss ratios are high? What happens then? So then, why, if you're an insurance, then focus on the things that, you're basically saying that you're going to differentiate yourselves on. And then, you're not really, as an MGA or a carrier, why would you differentiate yourselves on the tech stack that you're building rather than the actual value proposition that you're providing on your side? And then get something that actually works, it's proven, it's supported different systems, and not worry about that part in terms of recreating it and spending money on it, and spending a team and hiring a tech team to build something that you can find.
I think, and this was the one company I was mentioning, I think basically for them it was, yeah, we started on this, and if we have our own tech stack, and we went to a point where we cannot just say we did, people will do DD on it because they were late stage. And then all of a sudden it's like, the extra, I don't know, I'm making these numbers up, 50 million that have no added value to the business itself actually double our valuation. And so I'm getting another 50 million to invest in another business. I'm putting 50 million, it's just gone, right? In terms of actually solving certain problems, because you'll then invite certain things, because things, but that was, I think that was the rationale. And I think it kind of comes down to insurtech valuations. If your story and you're pegging it to SaaS valuations, well, you need a tech product. I don't think, I'm sure that Pipedrive doesn't run on Salesforce. I don't know. I haven't checked, but I would find that strange. And it's just certain dynamics that come with the territory of fundraising and IP that need to be navigated. And sometimes, I would say more non-VC unicorn business sense overrules and say, listen, okay, it's fine, because I'm actually, and I think we'll see a new wave of different MGAs where you don't have two kids from college that raise, I mean, you're from the real Silicon Valley, right? You get these tremendous checks, and then people wonder, when the party stops. But maybe I would imagine some experienced underwriting teams out of the cyberspace is right. They get it, right? They get that. I would imagine, people in the Lloyd's market, they wouldn't say, oh yeah, I'm going to build my own thing. I think, more experienced insurance professionals might get that, I would imagine. But ultimately, some people need to make their own mistakes, and then they come back.
Yeah, absolutely. And then, you can make the argument of, everything right now is an integration play. So if you're building, a comprehensive suite of functionality, you're building an end-to-end solution, it's not one monolithic system that's going to do everything. So you can focus on building some parts, but you know what? There are other companies that have basically perfected this and have focused on one module in this end-to-end solution really well. So then your value is going to be, how do you integrate with all these, disparate systems? And how do you control the data? How do you navigate the data in order to make better decisions for what you want to do, whether it's rating or underwriting? That's how you can. I think that's a better way in terms of managing the value proposition than trying to recreate one thing. And I'm with you. Like, yeah, you focused on money, you spent this thing, and you built it. Okay, great. You VCs love it. You built a tech stack, but then is this tech stack or is this thing that you built for one thing specifically, is it going to be useful for other things as well? And then investors may come in and say, okay, great, you built this thing and you targeted motor insurance. Now you want to go into another line of business, a complementary product like homeowners. Then how can you take that same stack and do it? Oh, we need to hire this many more people. We need to modify the certain things to accommodate that. Then that becomes, why wouldn't you just have one thing that you're focused on, and then have the integrations identified and building out that comprehensive suite that you want to accomplish?
No, absolutely. I fully agree. I wanted to. I haven't seen it anywhere else, but an interesting approach I've seen, especially one company, big fans of them, Neo Digital, out of Germany, Saarbrücken, full stack carrier, PNC, and as everyone else, they realized it's really hard to get to the customer. Right? It's really about distribution and making the product, customer journey process, commercials, etc. work. So what they managed to do, and I thought that was really interesting, and of course they actually built which a lot of German full stack carriers did. They picked, there's probably 8 of them or 12. All of them picked some standard software. Funny enough, no one picked the same one. So that's interesting. Maybe there's 2, and then they added the middle layer on top, right? For product rating, etc. The stuff that you built, but they didn't do accounting, invoicing, billing, etc. And what they then said was they actually created joint ventures with the largest German car insurer is a mutual, Hook. Mm-hmm. And they created a joint venture with where they put in their platform, they have a joint carrier, and they had Hook also invest in the core company to create different motor-related products, but on the Neo Digital platform. They did another partnership with another HDI, another big insurer, on the claims system. And the Christopher Lohmann, he called it bake. So, buy and make, where you put things into a joint venture, where you can co-develop and co-commercialize. And I thought that was actually a very interesting way, because some of these concerns, as with big distribution, it's not always about product. It's not always about technology. If it was the case, teams wouldn't have taken over Slack. Some things is about commercialization, about bundling, about de-risking certain things. Is that something that what's your view about this? Is this something you've seen yourself? And is this even something that you would consider under certain circumstances for Socotra as well?
Yeah. First of all, I mean, Neo Digital, I'm not very experienced with what they specifically done, or haven't come across them until I recently just looked at, what they were doing. But, I can mention a few cases where, our customers, and I, again, I'm not exactly sure. I mean, I know you described their model and their business model and what they're doing, but, we have certain customers that have actually implemented similar types of things where they, and one of them is in Europe. So one of them is in Europe. They work with a large they distribute their insurance products. It's almost an embedded insurance product, and they sell their products as a white label, PNC product for a carrier, but they basically take on the entire servicing, and they're building the insurance as a service platform for these carriers for them. So almost like, well, they own the entire insurance processing from A to Z, from quote bind, from interaction engagement, all the way to the claims processing and so forth, where all the insurance companies doing is providing them the paper, but everything is white labeled on their side. And yeah, they're distributing and selling insurance, whether it's, homeowners or liability through a supermarket chain, or whether it's a motor insurance through through other types of things directly with motor carriers or motor with car companies. So they're doing that thing, and this is our customers, and they're using Socotra as one element of that. So they're using Socotra as the core, and they're building a lot of things around it in order to basically have that complete solution, through integrations and through other things. So that's one example of even our customers are doing that. And we have another customer that is working and selling insurance through Uber. So through Uber, when you're buying a vehicle interruption cover, if you're a driver and you buy a vehicle interruption cover, you're actually going to that site and you're purchasing it, through that form.
It's and sorry for not being clear. That's not what I meant. That to me is the normal. You build a full stack insurer, you take a core, you have some licensing, and whatever your business model is, right? Direct to consumer, embedded, white label. What I meant was you then take the technology assets that you've built, and so you go to Allstate and say, listen, guys, you have a larger development team than us. We get it. You probably, let's face it, in your lines of business have also more experience than us because you've ran this for, I don't know, since, catalog sales went or whatever, right? So you've done your job. However, we have invested, I don't know, thousands of developer days. We've stress tested this against so many product lines, and this is really great. But we appreciate that rather than you recreating the wheel, we'll suggest the following. We'll do a joint venture. You'll put in the source code into it, and then you co-develop and co-commercialize. I think that is because the insurer then also wants to reap the benefits of the IP, of the equity, and maybe it's a little bit of a lesson learned from Munich Re and SCOR and the like, where they got shafted on the underwriting losses, but at least they got the equity gains. And it's another development of the ecosystem because some of these insurers have CVCs, etc. And it just gets beautifully entangled.
Yes, I get your question now. Yeah, it's really the co-development, the co-development function, and really, it's two things. Hey, we're bringing the technology. You're bringing, the expertise of the market, of the subject matter expertise on your side. You know that market really well. You've been there in years. You understand the buying, structures. You understand the rating, the risks, and all that stuff. But, yes, but we've built something that's really good. It can cater to that market. Let's basically, either we'll give you the source code, and then you as a carrier, now we can collaborate on, taking the source code and then, bringing your subject matter experts into developing certain things. And maybe we build it or we configure it or even adjust it or amend it or so forth based on what you want to see going forward. And then it becomes this joint thing that you're selling together. I think, Nick, that's the question, right? That's a new model.
Basically, my point is at a certain threshold, it's not just about the technology, it's then also about the commercial models and the flexibility, because you might or might not, depending on your traction, your investor story, can do certain things that maybe Guidewire simply cannot do because it's because they don't have the mindset for it. I don't know, because it has never been done before. I don't know. I just wanted to, and I don't need to bang on to this point, but I'm thinking more and more as everyone seems to be having platforms and I'm sure every platform has been, it becomes a bit of a commodity. And now we need to find, again, what's the next phase of collaboration and tying these things in to get users and traction onto these things. And I think commercial models are important in that regard.
Yeah, I actually agree. Yeah, I think we're starting to see some of that materializing in the sense that, the sales cycle is different now. So it's no longer an implementation play. It's a co-development play, but you're right in the sense that it gets more complicated in terms of how do you structure the license at that point. Who ends up owning what? Can you take that code somewhere else? Does the insurance company own it then entirely and you can't reuse it? So yeah, there's some things that are there, but in general, I mean, that's a model that I think, we'll probably see more of, similar to what you mentioned in that example in terms of co-development on that front. So yeah, I mean, that's what we'll be seeing for sure.
Tom, conscious of time before we wrap up, any other, do you see any chinks in Suleiman's armor? Anywhere where we should try to point our finger before we wrap this up?
I liked your last example, because I really think that one has to think much further along the road, and that's why I also took this example. But there are also examples from the past. If you take credit cards or the SWIFT system, etc., there are in the past there were so many of those initiatives where, let's say, a whole industry or a lot of players just came together and said, okay, let's all take the Visa card or the MasterCard. I mean, it's not that all those banks worldwide started to develop their own credit card. So that's what I find at the moment very striking. And I'm just very curious for the next couple of years. Was this caused by the fact that the last 10 years there was just too much money around, and those valuations were based on what you explained, Nick? Those tax valuations were higher, and then finally a couple of years later we find out that it was not a very wise decision to put all this investment money in. So I'm just curious what will happen in the future. But there can't be enough space for this kind of those enormous amount of platform solutions. That's my impression. But I'm just wait and see, so to say.
Well, yeah. I would argue the insurance model does allow for an inefficient allocation of IT resources. It does still. I mean, it's competitive pressure, but it's long-term contracts, etc., etc. But I think there can be added benefits that go above and beyond the technology once you've reached a certain threshold of technology. You can't do this with, yo, it's me and my mate, in the garage. We'll build the standard. But yeah, I think it'll be interesting to see in how these models shift. But it was just interesting to hear your thoughts. Maybe Suleiman, is there any final question? And try to imagine a time after Socotra, and imagine a conversation with all the other, MGAs, etc., and where you just kind of, where the good friend of you says, listen, I want to launch this insurance product or this MGA. It doesn't have to be an MGA. It can be a new business line within an insurance carrier, something. And what would be your kind of 2 cents on what to do, what not to do, that maybe summarizes, condenses what you've seen, experienced in your professional life?
Yeah. So if you're an MGA and you're a startup MGA, I assume this is a startup MGA. Somebody's coming in. Hey, we're starting out. What do we do? Or what is the what is your advice in order for us to differentiate, in order for us to be successful? Yeah, I mean, obviously here's what I would say is, number one, get live fast. So put together a plan and get live. So don't sit down, take a long time to go live and make things perfect. You don't need to be perfect. Accept some manual processes, but in a sense, make sure that you go live fast. And then accept that MVP that you went live with is going to have a lot of fires. And that's fine. Accept that. And then iterate. The most important thing is to basically go live, learn from the market, iterate. So make sure, and then obviously I'm getting to the point where, yes, you go through these, get live, learn, iterate, and then really it's, then what is the technology? How are you going to build the technology for success? And that's where, start looking at things like, yes, IP, it's an APIs, how are you going to build it? Are you going to scale it through APIs, on the cloud? Sort of this is the technology part that comes in, and evaluate the technology that you're going to be using. And can you use that technology to allow you to go live quickly and be able to iterate? And then when we're saying go live fast is, make a priority or prioritize what are the things that you want to go live with, what are the most important things that you need, and the things that you don't need, you can basically worry about later. So if you're going to go with an auto insurance product, for example, or motor insurance, then, maybe you don't have to worry about renewals on day one, forget about it for now, go live with what you have, do renewals or do cancellations potentially after in day two, and that sort of things. That's my advice, to MGAs really is to start it out that way. And the key is, that's what I would say is really, think about, the technology part is think about true cloud, APIs, and then, is it worth it to build your own if you wanted to go? I would say no. Think about something that you can get full access to off the shelf on a product, on a policy admin system that you can basically start working on from day one.
Awesome.
Great.
Is there any last shout out? Anyone you'd like to talk to? Anyone you would not like to talk to as well before we wrap this up?
No, again, I would, I greatly appreciate the opportunity. If people are interested to learn more about the company, about us, please reach out. And obviously, we can, it's very easy to work on this platform and very easy to get things up and running. So that's how I would end it.
Awesome. Let's end it like that, on that note. Suleiman, thank you so much for your time. This was really interesting. Tom, also, thanks for chipping in. This was a little bit more my nerdy area. And gentlemen, was a pleasure. Stay safe, and hope to see you on the circuit. Take care.
Thank
Bye.
you.